happening, plebs? Today we're going to be talking about Ghost Reaper and Winter Blossom, or something like that. I forgot the TCG name already. But basically, if you've seen my other previous video on this subject, which kind of touches on this a bit, discussing, is Burning Abyss going to be viable after Shining Victories? I look like a very depressed child whose allowance has been taken away for like a whole month, right? It's pretty saddening stuff, right? This card, without a doubt, is phenomenal against Burning Abyss. Like, if you resolve this turn one, then you've sort of just like won the game at that point. Like, maybe hypothetically, if Livier was a Burning Abyss monster, like the deck could like still be able to function somehow. But the deck cannot function once you get Reapered, right? That's first and foremost. Let's get that out of the way. Like, if this resolves early enough, you're simply just not going to be able to play the game. But there's a couple of points I wanted to address. Now, I wanted to say, first of all, like, as someone who very much enjoys Burning Abyss as an archetype, as a theme, and mechanically, I always liked Burning Abyss. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my most beloved decks of all time. So, the release of this card is obviously very, very upsetting. Now, you're probably more than aware that Burning Abyss got no hits whatsoever on the ban list, and that's kind of maybe as like a prelude to the release of this card, and Konami realizing, well, we don't really need to hurt Burning Abyss when we could just release a card that hits Burning Abyss. Very, very hard, actually. But anyway, after thinking about this for a little bit, talking to some friends, came to the conclusion that it's probably not as insane as we've first thought it would be. Now, don't get me wrong, like, let's just set out the groundwork first of all and say very clearly that I do not think for any stretch of the imagination that this card is bad. It's not bad. It's really fucking good, right? Now, that's blatantly clear. But let's address some of the issues that this card has. Now, first and foremost, it's something I don't really talk about too much, because I think that, if you're willing to be a competitive player and travel to events, you're probably more than willing to spend whatever amount of money you need to play the most optimized, perfect standard list of a deck that you've perfected for your tournament, right? So money normally isn't an issue. But I think that there's a lot of factors that involve whether or not you play a card, and I think money can sometimes be a big factor for a lot of players, and I think the average competitive player will probably consider budget as some sort of like a deciding factor. Now, this card is an automatic 3-off staple in the side deck, so automatically that means that you're going to be playing, you're going to be spending a lot of money just for like a card to play against a matchup that arguably isn't even going to be around anymore. Like, a lot of people will probably have seen this card, been like, fuck this, I'm jumping ship, I ain't playing Burning Abyss anymore. Now, if you're going to a major event, and you're not anticipating Burning Abyss to show up, are you really going to spend money on 3 Ghost Reapers, as well as all the new support cards you might need? Like, for example, Cosmo player is going to need 2 Dark Ladies, they're going to need, I think like that's like the only really expensive card they would need, actually. So 3 Dark Ladies, or 2 Dark Ladies, probably most likely, right? I think that's really it. That's all that expensive coming out in Shining Victories. So to go even further than that and buy 3 Ghost Reapers just for your side deck, just for a matchup that you already inherently have a good matchup against anyway, a lot of average competitive players going to major events are probably not actually going to spend too much money on that. So that's the first point and factor here, is the fact that I don't think a lot of people will actually play this card. Now, you're probably thinking at this point, retorting, saying like, well, that's not really a justification, because that's their fault for not willing to spend that much money on it. That's true, but you need to consider that when you enter a major event, the meta is going to be full primarily of average competitive players, and the average competitive player, like I've just explained, for whatever monetary reasons, might not be willing to spend that much going forward into a major event, because of the aforementioned reasons. So that brings me to my second point. Let's say everyone is willing to buy this card, and make it a staple 3-off in their extra deck, side deck. Now, does that necessarily mean that at that point you lose, just because this card is played in a side deck? I don't think necessarily that is the case, because first and foremost, so game 1, this card is obviously not going to be an issue, unless someone crazy enough decides that they're going to expect Burning Abyss floating around everywhere, which would be a terrible meta call. But if you happen to get paired against such a person, you have to take the short end of the stick on the variant side. So game 1, let's just rule that out. You're not going to worry about this. So game 1 as a Burning Abyss player, you can get a bit of an edge and advantage if you play cards in your main deck that help facilitate not so much an easy, but a stronger game 1 against Cosmo, for example, right? So let's say, in the best case scenario, you beat your opponent game 1. Now game 2 and 3, the side deck happens. Now this is where the Ghost Reapers come in. Now this is where you're at your most vulnerable. Now, if we look at the percentages here, the chances of opening Ghost Reaper in your opening hand is something about a 30-ish% chance of opening a 3 of card in your opening 5 card hand. So 2/3 of the time, as a Burning Abyss player, you're going to be able to make your turn 1 field and establish double Dante or double Beatrice. Most of your Dantes are going to come out of the extra deck turn 1, probably even turn 2, right? So your opponent is going to have to draw that card. Otherwise, thereafter, the card is actually very, very dead. It's actually completely useless after that point, because of the fact that you've got your Dantes on the field and in the graveyard, so there's nothing to reap anymore, right? Now, that goes for game 3 as well. They have yet again, like, let's say you lose game 2, like, they open the Reaper, your Dantes get banished, you have no way of playing, you scoop it up, okay, you move on. Now, in game 3, there's another 30% chance that they won't open that card. So the percentages, I think, are very high in your favor, in the sense that you won't get reaped most of your games. Most of your games as a Burning Abyss player, you will not be reaped. And I think that's kind of incentive enough to maybe still keep playing the deck if you really enjoy the deck like I do. So percentage-wise, statistically, I think that this card is not going to impact as much as we first initially thought it was, because like drawing the same 30% 2 games in a row is not that likely, right? So that's my second main point. Now you're probably wondering at this point, well, there's other reasons for like playing this deck. For example, if I'm playing Cosmo against Burning Abyss, yes, let's say hypothetically, the worst case scenario, my opponent opens triple Dante with like 1 or 2 Beatrice on top of them. Okay, so my Reaper is not going to hit Dante anymore, because Dantes are now out of the extra deck. They don't have to worry about that anymore. There are other cards you can reap in this situation. As a Cosmo player, you can reap an F-Zero, which is something that you like will struggle against if you're not playing like a Cosmojo, or I can't really think of anything else that would really deal with an F-Zero in the extra deck for Cosmo. But you see my point. So you could reap a Beatrice and you could reap an F-Zero thereafter. Now, obviously those hurt, but I think while your main deck, you know, boss monster, prime fucking card that you go to at every given opportunity, in most case scenarios you go for Dante, I think that not being hit is more important than F-Zero being hit with a Reaper. So, like I said, this card is really good, it's really phenomenal, but because of statistics and percentages I've suggested, because of the monetary reasons that a lot of people may not even be willing to pick this card up and play it against a deck that they will maybe see like once or twice throughout the course of a whole tournament, a lot of people won't actually be willing to spend that much money on it. And because of the statistics, like I said, chances of opening this card, you know, it's at its best turn 1. After turn 1, the card becomes exponentially more and more lackluster as the game goes on. So I think because of those reasons, I think that this card does have problems in the sense that it's kind of not that great outside of turn 1. Outside of opening it, it's going to be very bad. But like I said, on the other hand, like you do have F-Zero to reap potentially. You can reap a Beatrice. Is that enough to warrant it being a staple 3 offsides, regardless of whether or not you open it? It might be for some people, and it might not be. And this is where I guess I'd like to finish my video and ask for your thoughts on it. Do you think that Reaper is actually as good as people are making out? Do you think that because of the percentages I've suggested, do you think it's going to be that much of an impact over the course of a full tournament? Because over the course of a full tournament, you know, you're not, like this, statistically 2/3 of your games, you're not actually going to be reaped. More than 2/3 of the games, because we're including game 1. So most of the time you won't actually be reaped. Therefore, Burning Abyss could potentially still be viable. And because of monetary reasons, of course, like people won't be willing to pick this up. So yeah, I'm just gonna like end this here and ask, like, do you think that this card is as good as people have made out? Is there anything I've missed out, perhaps, that suggests that maybe there's more reasons why this card isn't that good? Or is there some things that I've completely overshadowed and that does make this card amazing, and that's just something I've completely forgotten? Maybe I am underestimating just how good this card is, even outside of turn 1. Maybe I'm underestimating just how relevant it will be to a meta where players attending may change up their deck choices, you know, just because like this Reaper exists. Are people really going to stop playing Burning Abyss? I don't think so. Maybe not. So yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think. Do you guys think I've, you know, overlooked anything, or if there's anything I've missed out, please point it out. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Thanks for watching as usual, and see you next time.
Come, face me. Give in to your pride.